Okay, guys, I'm going to do a reaction video here. Big hat tip to my friend Grant Navarre over there, and I'll post a link to his channel. He does a lot of react videos. I don't do many of them. I've done a few in the past, kind of old school, but this is one that I want to show you on the Alec Baldwin video that recently came out, the interview on ABC News. So I wanted to kind of go through some of that because there are some misconceptions about what happened and some things that are being said in the name of, I would say, litigation, knowing that there are pending lawsuits out there. And in fact, Baldwin refers to many of those lawsuits in his own video interview. So I wanted to point that out real quick and show you guys a little bit of his video and, again, my reaction to that, as I think there are some key points that need to be pointed out and actually inaccuracies and irresponsibilities that were done.
When the scene is the two guys are there who have got me, cornered, and they think I'm shot pretty bad, and I'm kind of wilting, and they have a gun, and the sound outside distracts them, and I then draw the gun, cross-draw out of my holster, pull the gun up like that, and start to cock the pistol, cut. I'm handed a gun, and someone declares, they said, "This is a cold gun."
Dave Halls.
Okay, notice what he's doing right here. What he's doing is, and again, a lot of what he clearly is trying to lay down in this video, which he did not have to do, knowing there were lawsuits out there. Clearly, a lot of what he's doing is laying down that public, I guess, persona and putting out a perception out there that there was nothing he did wrong, that everything he could have done differently, or he could not have done anything differently to avoid the situation, the killing of the woman on the set. Again, he did not have to do this video. He did not have to do this interview. The lawsuits are probably well into next year, but he's doing that. But he is setting the stage for the "I did nothing wrong" defense. And there's nothing I could have done differently defense, and that it was somebody else's fault defense.
The first AD, in my years on the sets of film, hot gun meant that there was a charge in there, and cold gun meant there was nothing in there. When he's saying this is a cold gun, what he's saying to everybody on the set is, you can relax. The gun is empty.
That's what cold gun means.
Well, cold gun means there's no charge in there. There could be dummy rounds.
A dummy round looks like a real...
Okay, again, he's making it very obvious that he's saying, I just did my job and I was relying on somebody else to do their job, which somebody else was supposed to do their job. I'm not saying all the fault lies on Alec Baldwin. What I'm saying is, as the last person to touch anything, now let's make this very clear, and I have another video on the actual type of weapon that was used, basically a replica of this. This is the original single action Army that the gun was actually modeled after that they used. So I have another video on that you guys can check on. I'll link it up at the top. But he's basically saying that he was handed a gun. It was the guy's job, the armorer in this case, it was their job to make sure that the firearm was safe. And that's what he was told, that was what he identified at the time. And there was nothing that he could have or should have done, in his case, what he's saying, to make sure that that gun is safe. Again, my point is, and I think all of us responsible gun owners are always taught that you are that last line of defense. Never take anybody's word for anything, ever. And that's what he did in this case. He took somebody's word for it, and he's saying, why should I have ever questioned that? Because we never had a negligent discharge in the past. So why should I have questioned it now? That is one of the dumbest things as a gun owner that you can say. That's like me saying every time somebody handed me a gun and said it was empty, it wasn't. And I always pulled the trigger without checking the chamber because it was always empty. So I kept doing that. And then all of a sudden one day I kill somebody and go, well, all the times I did it in the past, there was never a bullet in there. So why should I distrust somebody now? That's what Baldwin is saying here. Let's continue.
And you were rehearsing that scene. Was it an actual rehearsal? There's some disagreement about that, whether it was a formal rehearsal at that time.
This is a marking rehearsal where I'm going to show her. She's standing next to the camera.
Listen to
She's
this.
like this. You're me.
This is the
She's got a
positioning.
monitor here. The camera.
This is going to be the positioning, and I'm going to back this up just a hair. what he's describing here is the positioning of the lady who was shot, and he may even go on to describe how the director, the Souza guy, who was also shot in the shoulder. Remember, a lot of us thought at first, well, if two people were shot, there must have been 2 rounds that were fired. That's not the case here. He actually is going to describe this. He actually also describes that the gun is not being fired or aimed into the camera. It's actually being aimed at the cinematographer, the lady who was killed. And this, pay attention to this very next clip, because he's describing how she was positioned and how the gun was positioned.
Rehearsal at that time.
This is a marking rehearsal where I'm going to show her. She's standing next to the camera. She's like this. You're me. She's got a monitor here. The camera is here filming that way. She takes a monitor that is his monitor, the operator, and turns it toward her. It swivels, and she says to me, hold the gun lower. Go to your right. Okay, right there. All right, do that. Now show it a little bit lower.
What he's describing is essentially the cinematographer had her right side aimed at Baldwin, and Baldwin was aimed at her. So the camera was in front of her, aiming at Baldwin, and she was basically at a 90-degree angle, and she turned a monitor that was facing opposite Baldwin, turned it this way so that she could view it with Baldwin to her right, aiming towards her to try to get that right angle of the gun to where it looked good on camera.
She's getting me to position the gun. Everything is in her direction. She's guiding me through how she wants me to hold the gun for this angle. And I draw the gun out and I find a mark. I draw the gun out and I find a cut. And what's really urgent is the gun wasn't meant to be fired in that angle.
So if you're shooting directly into the camera lens, you're not aiming.
I'm not shooting into the camera lens. I'm shooting just off.
Just off.
Right, in her direction. I'm holding the gun where she told me to hold it, which ended up being aimed right in below her armpit, was what I was told. I don't know. This was a completely incidental shot, an angle that may not have ended up in the film at all. But we kept doing this, and so then I said to her, now in this scene, I'm going to cock the gun. And I said, do you want to see that? And she...
Now, this is important. And this is identified in my other video where I describe how the gun did not just go off by itself. He's describing how the gun was not meant to be fired in this scene, but it was meant to be cocked in the scene. So he is describing, originally, if you remember, they said that there was no trigger, the trigger was never pulled. And everyone is kind of wondering, well, what manipulated and who manipulated the gun to where it could go off, because the gun is a machine. It's a series of gears and things like that. And something has to manipulate the firearm in order for it to go off. So at first, when initial reports came out, he said he never pulled the trigger, and he makes that very clear in this video that he never pulled the trigger. He's saying he never intentionally pulled the trigger. Let's make sure we understand that. He's saying he never pulled the trigger, but we need to remember the intentional part. Did he intentionally pull the trigger? By that, let me play this clip, and I want you to understand, he's admitting that he cocked the hammer, but he's saying he never pulled the trigger. Let me play this through.
See that? And she said yes. So I take the gun and I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, do you see that? She goes, well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that. And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
Now, how does that happen? Again, you'll see in my other video. A hammer on a single action army does not drop on its own once it's being cocked. That's not how they work. And again, you'll have to watch my other video for that. This is more discussion about Baldwin describing what happened, but what he's saying could not have happened by itself.
I let go of the hammer, and the gun goes off.
At the moment.
That was the moment the gun went off, yeah. That was the moment the gun went off.
It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Listen.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never. That was the training that I had. You don't point a gun at me and pull the trigger.
His attorney told him to say that. Without question, the attorney told him to say that. He's saying that he never pulled the trigger. What they're going to say in their defense when they go to court is that he didn't pull the trigger. He didn't intentionally set out to, okay, I am going to now pull the trigger. Again, in my other video, you're going to see how that hammer fell with him still manipulating that trigger. Now, he states that his finger was not on the trigger. That is not possible. So in my other video, you'll see a pretty detailed explanation of that. But this video interview was set up by Baldwin and his attorneys to lay groundwork to try to manipulate what a jury would be thinking once they get to that, because they know this is going to a court case and they know it's going to happen. So this is trying to taint any potential jurors out there so that they say, well, all this time I've been hearing Baldwin say he never pulled the trigger. So whether or not he manipulated the trigger, that can be a judgment call on somebody else's part. Those of us in the gun industry and those of us who are gun experts, we know how single action Army guns actually work. And again, I keep referring to my video, but go check out my other video and you will absolutely see that a hammer cannot fall without some kind of manipulation of that trigger, unless it was just not pulled back far enough and you allowed it to fall forward, which is still negligence. If you are handling, that is not a prop gun. And the reason why I say that, they keep calling this prop guns. Prop guns, a true prop gun, you might have it used as a prop. That doesn't make it a prop gun if it can fire live ammunition. There are prop guns out there that do not fire. You can't put a bullet in them. The action doesn't work. They have a revolving action that will move to simulate you cocking a gun, but there's no trigger mechanism, no true trigger mechanism. There's no real bolt inside the gun and no firing pin in the gun that will allow it to fire. In fact, many of the actual muzzles and chambers are actually filled. They're solid iron or steel. So you can't even, a round wouldn't go in a chamber or fire through it anyway. Those are true prop guns. Those guns cannot fire an actual projectile. And those are by definition a prop gun. They were using a gun that is a legitimate firearm. You have to have an FFL. A prop gun, you do not need a background check or to run it through an FFL in order to purchase one. The gun that they used, very similar to this one, an actual replica of this gun, you have to have an FFL because it is by definition an actual firearm, can fire a projectile, and it is not a prop gun. It is a real gun that is being used as a prop. Guys, this is going to be a case that will cost somebody a lot of money. Again, I will repeat, Baldwin is allowing this because a lot of people are like, why would he do an interview? It seems like anything he would say would incriminate himself. This video, if you remember, the public made up their mind on Kyle Rittenhouse, that he was either guilty or not guilty well before any of the facts were actually seen. His attorneys are very well aware of this, and his attorneys are trying to lay the groundwork to taint anybody's view and opinion out there of what Alec Baldwin may or may not have done. This was probably done, this interview was probably done at the instruction of his attorneys.